The cameras zoomed in, the nation leaned forward, and Gavin Newsom dropped a political bombshell that left Jasmine Crockett visibly stunned. His words sliced through the air with practiced precision, the kind of verbal strike that wasn't meant just for his opponent but for every viewer watching at home. In that moment, he wasn't debating. He was performing, eager to showcase dominance under the blinding lights of live television. Crockett sat silent, the blow landing hard, her composure tested before millions. Newsom leaned back, a half smirk, pulling at the corner of his mouth, the body language of a man convinced he had already won. Commentators would later call it ruthless, even cruel, but in that instant the crowd gasped as though witnessing a knockout punch. For supporters of Crockett, hearts sank. Was this how the night would unfold? A polished governor dismantling an outspoken congresswoman with calculated ease? For a brief heartbeat, it seemed as if the entire narrative of the debate had been written in those opening seconds. But what happened next? No one, not even Newsom himself, saw coming. The debate wasn't just another sparring match between two politicians. It was a stage where the stakes stretched far beyond the studio lights, into living rooms, social media feeds, and the very soul of America's ongoing identity struggle. On one side stood Gavin Newsom, polished, ambitious, the kind of figure who could glide through the toughest questions with a smile that seemed designed for magazine covers. His reputation as a ruthless strategist had been earned not just through policy battles, but through the art of theatrics. To many, he embodied the smooth, untouchable face of establishment power. Opposite him sat Jasmine Crockett, fiery, underestimated, and unapologetically authentic. She didn't carry the gloss of a carefully managed image. She carried the raw weight of lived experience. In rooms like these, she was often dismissed as too bold, too brash, too unwilling to bend. Yet that very defiance had become her strength. The reason grassroots supporters looked to her as a voice that refused to be silenced. This clash wasn't about left versus right alone. It was about power versus resilience, calculation versus authenticity. The cameras were rolling, but history was also keeping score. Viewers at home had no idea they were about to witness one of the most unforgettable live TV moments of the decade, and, as the night unfolded, every word, every pause, every glance would push both combatants closer to a turning point neither could escape. Gavin Newsom did not arrive on that debate stage as a political novice. He arrived as a man whose entire career had been sculpted to look unshakable under pressure. From his earliest days in California politics, Newsom carried himself with the kind of confidence that blurred the line between charm and arrogance. He was tall, articulate, camera-ready, the sort of figure who seemed as if he had been designed in a political laboratory to withstand the spotlight. His reputation as a debater had long been tied to this natural ease. When questions grew tough, he smiled. When opponents struck hard, he nodded calmly, as if to say their punches were little more than breezes against a mountain. This composure played well on television, convincing audiences that Newsom not only understood the issues but had mastered the art of control. Yet beneath that sheen, critics often noted a pattern. He dismissed opponents with condescending smirks, the tilt of his head or the subtle roll of an eye. It was a tactic to undermine, without words, to make rivals appear smaller simply by how he looked at them. That duality defined him, polished on the surface, ruthless underneath. Ambition fueled it all. For years, whispers followed him through the halls of power. Whispers that he wasn't merely content with governing California. His eyes, some insisted, were set on a national prize. Each debate, each appearance, each perfectly rehearsed soundbite became another brick in the pathway to higher ambition. Supporters admired his composure. Detractors saw it as entitlement dressed in charm. On that night, these contradictions were on full display. Newsom exuded the calm of a man who had faced countless cameras before, who believed he could outmaneuver anyone in his orbit. To the audience, he looked immovable, his confidence radiating like armor. Yet arrogance has a way of breeding blind spots. He underestimated the woman sitting across from him. He believed his rehearsed lines, sharpened over years of practice, would pierce her defenses with ease, and while Newsom sharpened his teeth for the fight, Crockett was preparing something no one expected. Jasmine Crockett's story was never one of privilege. She was not born into political dynasties or groomed for the spotlight. Her roots were grounded in struggle, the kind that doesn't polish a person, but hardens them, tempers them, and teaches them what it means to fight for every inch of progress. Long before she stood beneath the unforgiving glare of national television, she had already walked through fire. As a young woman, Crockett was no stranger to being dismissed. Teachers, peers, even early colleagues often underestimated her drive, branding her too outspoken, too unwilling to wait her turn. But that very resistance to silence became her defining trait. When others hesitated, she raised her voice. When the odds stacked against her, she learned to see those odds not as barriers, but as challenges to tear down. Her entry into public life wasn't cushioned by elite networks or establishment backing. Instead, it came from the grassroots, from standing shoulder to shoulder with people whose voices had long been ignored. She represented communities where struggle wasn't an abstraction, but a daily reality. Working families, immigrants, single parents, the marginalized and overlooked. Every campaign she ran, every cause she championed, carried that same pulse of defiance, the belief that even the smallest voice could shake the largest halls of power. To many, Crockett was fiery, sometimes too fiery. Her passion was raw, unpolished, and often unnerving to those who preferred politics as a polite performance. But to her supporters, that fire was the point. She spoke with the urgency of someone who knew what was at stake, because she had lived it. She embodied the belief that politics wasn't about prestige, it was about survival, dignity, and truth. By the time she sat across from Gavin Newsom under the blinding lights of live television, she carried more than her own ambition. She carried the weight of every time she had been told she couldn't, every moment she had been underestimated, every slight that had once tried to define her. But instead of breaking her, those moments built her into a fighter who thrived when cornered. So, when the moment came, Crockett wasn't just speaking for herself. She was speaking for everyone who had ever been underestimated. The air inside the studio thickened as the debate pushed forward, every exchange growing sharper than the last. Newsom, with his signature poise, fired off statistics and polished jabs as though he were conducting an orchestra, each note designed to tighten his grip on the narrative. His cadence was flawless, his smile unwavering, and for a while it seemed as though he was dancing circles around his opponent. Crockett, however, did not flinch. She listened, eyes fixed, her silence punctuated only by the faintest nods. For every attempt he made to corner her, she deflected with calm restraint. When he threw out a dismissive quip about her inexperience, she responded not with fury, but with measured clarity, reminding the audience that lived experience was a kind of expertise no textbook could replicate. Her words landed softly, but they carried weight, enough to unsettle those watching closely. The moderator's eyes darted nervously between the two, sensing the rising temperature in the room. Viewers at home could feel it too. This wasn't the scripted back and forth of ordinary politics. This was a collision of egos, identities, and visions for what leadership should look like. Newsom pressed harder. His voice rose, his smirk widened. He leaned in, slicing into Crockett with lines designed to diminish her presence, to shrink her in the public eye. The crowd shifted in their seats, murmurs rippling through the studio as tension mounted. Crockett's allies feared she might be swallowed whole by his relentless confidence. But Crockett refused to give him the satisfaction of watching her crack. Her answers were short, deliberate, carrying a patience that suggested she was waiting for something. Waiting for the precise moment when silence would give way to fire. Every deflection only heightened the suspense, building toward a release no one yet saw coming. The clash was no longer just a debate. It was a battle of willpower, of endurance, of narrative control. And as Newsom delivered yet another carefully rehearsed blow, Crockett's posture shifted ever so slightly. She leaned forward, eyes narrowing, lips parting as if to finally break. The restraint she had held so tightly. And then, with the nation holding its breath, Crockett leaned forward and began her counterattack. For a long moment, silence lingered. Newsom had just finished a cutting remark, his smile stretched wide, convinced the debate was firmly in his control. The cameras caught his satisfied expression, the smirk of a man who believed he had already secured victory. But then, Jasmine Crockett leaned forward. Her eyes sharpened, her voice steady, and in that instant, the atmosphere shifted. "Governor," she began slowly, each word deliberate, "you talk about experience, about polish, about how smooth leadership should look. But the people I represent don't care about how smooth you sound. They care about whether you've lived their struggles, whether you've stood where they stand." The studio grew quiet, the audience sensing something seismic stirring. Newsom's smirk faltered for the first time, his eyes narrowing as he searched for the confidence that had carried him thus far. Crockett pressed on. "You dismiss me as inexperienced, but let me tell you something. My experience isn't in country clubs or cocktail fundraisers. My experience is in courtrooms defending people who couldn't afford a lawyer, in neighborhoods where parents wonder if the lights will stay on, in communities that politicians like you only visit when the cameras are rolling." Gasps rippled through the crowd. The moderator blinked rapidly, as if unsure whether to interject or simply let history write itself in real time. Crockett paused, allowing her words to breathe, allowing the weight of truth to sink in. "You say you're calm under pressure," she continued, her tone lifting. "But calm doesn't pay the bills. Calm doesn't stop a child from going hungry. Calm doesn't fight for justice when the system is stacked against ordinary people. What you call composure, I call detachment. And the people I fight for don't need detachment. They need fire. They need someone willing to burn through the lies and tell them the truth, even when it's not polished, even when it's not pretty." The audience erupted in applause, a wave of sound that seemed to rattle the walls. Newsom shifted uncomfortably, his polished exterior beginning to crack. The camera caught him tightening his jaw, his fingers tapping nervously on the podium. For the first time all night, he looked smaller. Crockett wasn't finished. She leaned in further, her voice rising with each phrase. "You've built a career on controlling the narrative, on making people believe that style is substance. But tonight, Governor, substance is standing right here. And I am not afraid of your smirks, your rehearsed lines, or your ambition, because what I bring to this stage is not performance. It's people, real people. And they are tired of being talked down to." A standing ovation erupted from sections of the crowd. Even those who came undecided now leaned forward, captivated, as if witnessing the underdog seize control of the entire room. Newsom tried to interject, but his words stumbled, his timing off, the flow he once controlled slipping from his grasp. Crockett delivered her final strike, the one that cemented the reversal. Her voice softened, but her words carried the sharpest edge of all. "You wanted to destroy me on live television, Governor. But you forgot something. You forgot that when you attack someone like me, you're not just attacking me. You're attacking every person who's ever been told they don't belong, every voice that's been silenced, every community that's been ignored. And when we rise, we don't rise alone. We rise together." The crowd roared, a thunderous standing ovation that drowned out anything Newsom might have tried to salvage. The split-screen broadcast told the story better than words. On one side, a governor scrambling to maintain composure. On the other, a congresswoman transformed into the hero of the night. Newsom's shoulders slumped slightly, his trademark smile gone, replaced with the faint scowl of a man who had just realized the stage he thought belonged to him had been taken. The cameras caught it, the audience saw it, and the moment crystallized into something unforgettable. Jasmine Crockett had flipped the script. The underdog had become the victor, not with theatrics, but with truth sharpened by dignity and delivered with fire. But the story didn't end on that stage. It exploded across the nation. The debate ended in the hall that night, but its reverberations began instantly. Before the moderator could even thank the audience, a dozen phones were already raised, their cameras capturing the electricity still hanging in the air. By the time Gavin Newsom walked off stage, the narrative had already slipped out of his control. Twitter, or X, as some insisted on calling it, caught fire first. A single clip, 15 seconds long, showed Jasmine Crockett leaning forward, voice low but unshakable, delivering her verbal lightning strike. Someone captioned it, "This is what courage looks like." Within minutes, the clip crossed 1 million views. By dawn, it wasn't just trending. It was the trend. Trending hashtags that morning, sees Crockett unleashed, mic drop moment, Newsom shaken, voice of the people. The hashtags danced across the screen like battle flags, each one picked up, repurposed, and hurled into the digital fray. Memes appeared within the hour. Crockett silhouetted against flames with the caption, "She brought the heat." Newsom, caught mid-stammer, became the subject of endless loops titled "When the Mask Slips." But it wasn't just internet comedians fueling the fire. Major commentators, anchors, and political influencers chimed in. Rachel Maddow, MSNBC. This wasn't just a strong performance. This was a moment, the kind we'll be talking about 10 years from now. Mehdi Hassan. I've covered debates for decades. I've never seen a reversal this clean, this decisive. Crockett didn't just counterpunch, she redefined the fight. Conservative pundit, Fox News. Let's be clear, Newsom got blindsided. That wasn't a debate win, that was a political ambush. Celebrities, too, added fuel. Viola Davis tweeted simply, Jasmine Crockett. LeBron James reposted the mic drop clip with the words, respect. The cultural tide was undeniable. Crockett had crossed from politician to symbol. Meanwhile, Newsom's team scrambled. Their statement, released at 3 a.m., insisted the governor had made clear substantive points, and that, out of context, clips were misrepresenting his performance. But the damage was done. In the age of virality, perception wasn't shaped by carefully crafted press releases. It was shaped by raw footage, 15 seconds at a time. Cable news treated the fallout like an aftershock to an earthquake. Split-screen montages dominated broadcasts. Crockett's poised delivery replayed alongside Newsom's tight jawline and faltering eye contact. Commentators gestured animatedly, parsing every pause, every raised eyebrow, every flicker of body. Language CNN plastered the headline, "From underdog to icon, Crockett seizes the stage." Fox News countered with, "Newsom under siege. Did Crockett play dirty?" But even on hostile networks, the power of the clip could not be denied. Audiences weren't just watching, they were choosing sides. In community centers, in barbershops, in college dorms, the same debate replayed in real time. Crockett's words were quoted like scripture. "We're not here to polish egos. We're here to speak truth." For many, it wasn't just about politics. It was about recognition, representation, the feeling that someone had finally said what they had always wanted to say. Pollsters noticed the tremors, too. Overnight surveys showed a remarkable swing in favorability, not just for Crockett, but for the broader ideals she seemed to embody. Newsom, once untouchable, suddenly looked mortal. And yet, beyond the numbers, beyond the memes and hashtags, something deeper had shifted. Crockett's counterattack wasn't just a political win, it was a cultural spark. A reminder that narratives aren't written by the polished or the powerful alone. Sometimes they're rewritten by those who were told to sit down, to wait, their turn to know their place. That night, Crockett had refused, and as the country scrolled, argued, laughed, and cheered, the significance of that refusal grew. The story had leapt from a single stage into the bloodstream of a nation hungry for disruption. Cliffhanger transition. Yet beyond the hashtags and headlines, the real meaning of this clash was only just beginning to sink in. The debate, hall emptied slowly that night, but the echoes of Jasmine Crockett's words refused to leave. Long after the applause died down and the lights dimmed, something larger than politics lingered in the air, the quiet after a storm that had not destroyed but revealed. What had unfolded wasn't just a clash of arguments. It was a confrontation between two forces, arrogance and dignity, spectacle and truth, power and resilience. Crockett understood it better than anyone. For her, the stage had never been about her own ego. She hadn't spoken merely to score points or outshine a rival. She had spoken because silence was no longer an option. She had spoken because every person who had ever been dismissed, talked over, or underestimated was in that room with her. And that was the resolution of the story. Not that she won a debate, but that she transformed it into something much more enduring. She made it about what truly matters. By the following morning, the headlines were already calling it a political upset, a surprising twist, or the night Crockett arrived. But Crockett herself knew the truth ran deeper than a media cycle. What people were responding to wasn't strategy or clever sound bites, it was authenticity. It was the power of someone refusing to bend under the weight of intimidation. The moral wasn't about who landed the sharper insult. It was about who carried themselves with integrity when the lights were brightest. What Crockett modeled that night was a universal truth. Dignity will always cut deeper than derision. Arrogance may shout louder in the moment, but resilience builds echoes that last longer. In a world where shouting has become the norm and insult has replaced persuasion, Crockett reminded everyone that calm conviction can still silence a room, not because it overwhelms, but because it resonates. Her story, her fight, her rebuttal, it all reminded people that politics is not only about policies, but also about character. Who you are when challenged reveals more than any platform or poll. That night, Jasmine Crockett stopped being just a name on a ballot. She became a symbol that resilience is not weakness, that compassion is not fragility, that courage is not reserved for the loudest voice in the room. She showed that you do not need to match arrogance with arrogance. You do not need to meet hate with hate. The true counterattack is to stand tall, to keep your composure, to remind the world that dignity itself is a weapon. For anyone who had ever felt silenced, her victory was theirs. For anyone who had ever been underestimated, her rise was a mirror. The lesson of that night stretched far beyond politics. Justice outweighs arrogance. Dignity defeats hate. Truth will always outlast spectacle. It wasn't about a single debate stage. It was about the classrooms where children are told they can't, the workplaces where voices go unheard, the homes where someone whispers, "No one believes in me." Crockett's stand became a story they could carry with them, proof that no matter how powerful the opposition, no matter how loud the dismissal, truth and dignity can still prevail. So when the lights dimmed and the stage cleared, Jasmine Crockett didn't just walk off as the winner of a political spat. She walked off as something bigger, a reminder, a message, a spark. Because in that moment, Jasmine Crockett wasn't just a politician. She was a symbol of dignity over derision, of resilience over arrogance, of truth over spectacle. And symbols don't fade when the cameras turn off. They endure. They inspire. They remind us, long after the hashtags, long after the applause, that every voice matters, and that even the underestimated can rise, and rise powerfully. That's the uplifting resolution, tying the entire debate arc to a universal moral, with Crockett elevated from politician to enduring symbol. The lights dimmed, the echoes of applause, the viral hashtags, the shockwaves across cable news, all of it converged into one undeniable truth. This was more than just a political showdown. It was a reminder of something timeless. The title had promised fireworks. Gavin Newsom destroys Jasmine Crockett on live TV. Her response stuns everyone. And it delivered. But the deeper story wasn't about destruction. It was about resilience, about dignity, about what happens when someone refuses to be defined by someone else's attack and instead flips the script with truth. Because in the end, Crockett's victory wasn't measured in applause meters or trending tags. It was measured in the way her words pierced through cynicism, through arrogance, through the noise of politics as performance. She turned what looked like defeat into a lesson. No amount of bluster can silence integrity. And here's where you come in. This story doesn't stop with Crockett, or even with that stage. It lives on in every conversation, every repost, every share where people say, yes, dignity matters. Yes, truth still carries weight. Yes, the underdog can still rise. If you've watched this far, you already know. These moments aren't just entertainment. They're signals of something bigger, that courage, grace, and conviction will always shine brighter than arrogance. So here's our call to action. If you believe dignity will always outshine arrogance, hit subscribe and share this story. Because the more voices we amplify, the stronger we all become. Because tonight, it wasn't just Jasmine Crockett who won. It was the idea that truth still matters. And that's a victory worth spreading.